Before we get in today's episode, I just want to give a little bit of a pre-warning that I am suffering from a cold and I'm doing my best vocally to not sound like Kermit the Frog, but there are moments that it's probably going to come out. So please don't judge my voice on how it's going to be for the rest of the time of your experience here on Let's Talk Spooky. But I have children, and my children lick windows and bring all of the things home. So please bear in mind that my voice may crack, but hopefully it'll be better for next week. Thanks, guys. Hey, spooky souls, and welcome to part 2, I guess, of our Glitch in the Matrix time slip episode. And today we're diving into Reddit stories, and I'm so excited. I collected all of these over the last couple of weeks, and I just can't wait to share them with you. Some of them are really creepy. Some of them are kind of, I don't know if creepy is the right word or strange, but they all deal with either glitch in the matrix or time slips. And if you haven't checked out last week's episode, we dove into what time slips are and how they differ from stepping back in time or traveling in time. So if you haven't checked out that episode, please do, because it might help make it a little bit more clear about people's experiences in this one. Also, I am just so excited. I have seen the numbers of individuals who have started to follow us in the last few weeks go up tremendously, and it just gives me so much love. And I'm so excited to grow this channel with you all and to see it come to life. I never actually thought it would get this far, I'm not gonna lie, but I'm super excited to build a community. And if you haven't hit that follow button, you're thinking about it, you're not sure, please do. Stick around, hang out with us. We're a pretty cool community, and we're gonna get into some really creepy stuff. So without further ado, let's jump in to the Reddit stories. Some stories blur the line between reality and the unfamiliar. They whisper in the night, waiting to be heard. So let's listen. Let's talk spooky. Our first story didn't have a title, but it was posted by external-chocolate21 about 10 months ago. And it goes, about 5 years ago, my daughter and I experienced a time slip. We were out late one night dumpster diving. We typically go out to Petco and grab all of the food that they throw away and give it to local shelters. You have no idea how much perfectly fine food they just throw away. Anyway, as I was driving home for the evening, I missed my turn, and I guess I wasn't paying attention, and we live in a really, really small area / town. And I've been here for 20 years. I know the roads like the back of my hand. I remember having the radio turned up too loud, and my daughter and I were singing, and we were having a great time together that night. And we had a truck full of dog food. And like I said, I must have missed my turn on the main road and totally spaced. We always took the same route home, and I had thought to myself as I missed the turn that it was odd that I did that. We were in an industrial part of town, and just before you get to the main street, you have to go over a blue bridge that will take you from Washington to Idaho. The Snake River divides the two states, and so I missed the regular turn and took the next turn instead. Except once I took that turn, I didn't recognize where we were. There was a coffee shop on the corner that I'd never seen before, and a small store next to it that sold wigs. The coffee shop had a huge wraparound window with a mood lighting, and on the wig store, there was a huge front window where you could see all the mannequins on the wall displaying the shelves of different colors of wigs. My daughter was excited to see that there was a wig store, It was nearly October, and we were just discussing getting her a wig for her Halloween costume. She asked me to pull over so I could get a better look at the wigs through the window, but I told her that we could come back in the morning, and she talked about getting a red wig for the rest of the way home. Since there was a coffee shop next door, I asked if she would like to grab a chai latte before we go into the wig store, or maybe some hot chocolate, and she seemed really excited about that. We both thought about how weird it was that we didn't even know those stores were there. Like, this town is so small. There would have been some talk about a coffee shop at least. And I'm a small business owner with a lot of traffic. And I thought it was just weird that no one had ever mentioned a new coffee shop going in. And I hadn't heard or seen anything about the construction of it ever. It was just weird. But we traveled home, we went to bed, and the next morning I promised that we would head off to our wig destination. This is where things get weird. We went to go find the places, and we couldn't. We drove up and down very limited streets because, again, this was a small town, and we couldn't find the coffee shop or wig store anywhere. I drove up and down every street several times, and nothing. I even went to the Petco and retraced our steps completely. And we did the missed turn and everything, and we still couldn't find it. I couldn't because there was no next turn. There was no way I could have possibly turned anywhere but where I was supposed to. Because there was a police station where the road had been, and I thought I'd lost my mind. My daughter couldn't understand it either. There was no possible way for me to go onto that road I had gone down the night before, because it simply didn't exist. We went home after hours of looking, deflated and slightly bewildered. The second I got home, I got on the internet and looked up the two shops online, and there was nothing. I even checked Facebook. Nothing. I called a few of my friends to ask if they'd ever heard of a new coffee shop or a store that sold wigs, and they all laughed at me, like, no, they had never heard of that either. Later that night, I told my husband what happened, and he told me that I must have been mistaken and insisted that we all get in the car and drive down there, and he would find it for us. Typical man. Again, we drove down every single street, never did find the store we were looking for, and there's no explanation for it. They were there the night before, and the next morning, it was gone. And I swear, if I didn't have my daughter with me that night, I would have really been concerned for my mental health. But we both experienced this. We saw the same thing. Do I drive down that quiet road again? It's been years now, and I still haven't found those shops. But I keep my eye always open, hoping that I'll see it again one day. The whole experience, though, was just so strange. I have to say, experiences like that, they really get to me because they make you question where you are in your reality. I have never actually experienced a time slip myself, but there are memories that I have as a kid that I question sometimes, whether or not they were legit or they were made up, or I experienced something stranger than I remember. This story, I wasn't able to locate the username. It seems that they deleted their profile, but I still wanted to share the story. I have probably shared this before on some Reddit platform or another, but the walk into town from my house is about 2-mile stroll that I walk at least once every couple of weeks. It runs past an old Catholic primary school, and the day that this happened was on a particularly beautiful spring morning. The kids were playing in the schoolyard, there were birds singing, and the occasional car passed me. My mind wasn't really on anything that I can recall now, but it has been 8 years. The hush was the first thing that made me pay attention. It was as though someone had just shut the volume to mute on the world, and the sounds that I was hearing just stopped. The woman turned the corner and began walking towards me from a distance of a few yards, allowing me to look before we reached one another. She was in a light green day dress that looked from the 1950s. Her hair was dark. It was short style from that era, and she had big pearl earrings on. At first, I thought it was cosplay, but it didn't add up because the dress looked so well worn, and her black strap shoes were obviously scuffed up and ratty enough for me to notice them right away. She was not made up in a one might be in an engaging in some kind of cosplay. If anything, she looked drawn and tired. And if she had makeup on at all, it was fairly minimal. She and I never made eye contact, and the second she passed on the left, I turned around because it felt strange. More so when I realized that she was gone. I realized something was really wrong. The regular schoolyard noises reappeared, bird songs came back, and I couldn't explain what had just happened. I've walked along that road countless number of times since then. In the 18 years I've lived in this neighborhood, and I have never seen anything like it since. It really connects to what we talked about in last week's episode about that hush. It was very emphasized that time slips come with these moments in time that almost feel like everything around you was unplugged, and suddenly you're in this silent vacuum, and the world around you seems like it stepped out for a moment. I would be curious to know if the woman's face looked strange, or if there was any distinct features that were different, or if she looked at the surroundings, whether or not they seemed off or different besides the woman herself. But there's so many questions. Our next story is called Time Slip / Dimensional Slip, and the username was Endless Loop of Y / Endless Loop of Y. Way back in 2004, I was living with my friend in England. We used to go for walks on the countryside, out in the fields and all that. One time we were out walking and we spied a mini forest towards the end of the field. Curious, we went over to it, and as we approached, we noticed a little pathway or gap in the trees, so we decided to follow it. As we went along the trees, the pathway became a kind of archway, and as the trees were growing into this perfect shape over the path, things began to get strange. It seemed to go on for ages, maybe a half an hour. Eventually we saw daylight at the end, so we powered along and made it out of the exit into the open air. The outside looked normal. It was the countryside, except the exception of a strange settlement that seemed out of place. It looked like buildings were made out of junk, well, like wooden junk. There were tiny people, about 4 foot, maybe 5 foot max, everywhere around us. They were wearing rags and they were just watching. They looked muddy and unkempt, and they stared at my friend and I like we were the aliens from another world. There wasn't a road, just a muddy path through the center of the buildings, no power lines, nothing modern. And while I stood there, I suddenly felt this uncontrollable urge that I had to leave. I said to my friend that we should probably go, and we turned around and went back out the way we came. It's a pity that this happened in 2004, since we don't have the tech that we do today on hand, and it would have been cool to take photos and videos of everything, but we couldn't. Anyway, we went back and discussed it a few times, and eventually I couldn't stand it anymore. I convinced my friend that we needed to go back with a digital camera. But when we returned, we found the trees and the entrance, but when we followed the path, it lasted a few minutes and then emerged out the other side of the field. And the field was normal. There was no houses, no little people. We walked the perimeter of the trees, and it turns out it was just a square, an undeveloped part of the field land. There was no archway. There were no village. And suffice to say, there was no point in taking photos. I'm convinced that that day, if we hadn't have left, we would still be there. wherever there was. And maybe to this day, we would be another missing person report. I don't know about you guys, but I've always wondered, I've always had this feeling that those situations like missing 411s and such, which we are going to cover in an upcoming episode, that they're people who may have just walked from one time into another or into a different dimension. And that's why there's never a body. That's why there's never evidence. That's why they seemingly just turn around and disappear. I want to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think that there's the missing person cases that seemingly are just vanishing out of nowhere cases are maybe linked to something like this, where they seem to walk into a different world or different dimension? Let me know in the comments. I want to know what you guys think about that. That's just my thoughts on it. I think that there has to be some kind of explanation for why people just seemingly vanish, especially children, because kids they're open to those kinds of things. They're a little bit more susceptible to realms. Our fourth story is called Time Slip, Aliens, A Weird Walk Down the Block, and it's from Melodic Prior 1052. Last week, my partner and I were walking home from the grocery store. It was about 5 to 6 blocks from the store to our house along a fairly busy road. We were walking and happily chatting, and we both started to smell a strong smell of pipe tobacco. We started talking a bit about how we liked the smell of pipe tobacco and how it reminded us of the night way back when we first started dating. We were both looking around to try to find the person who was smoking a pipe, and to our surprise, there was 2 men smoking a cigar on the side of the road. And it seemed a bit weird now, but oh well, I suppose a cigar and a pipe can smell the same. We passed them by, and they both looked at us, and as we passed them, everything got weird. They started saying some kind of vaguely aggressive things. I can't remember exactly now what it was, but it sounded a lot like, "My God," in plain daylight, or something like that. And we both had the feeling that somehow it was directed towards us. So we didn't look back, we just kept walking. At this point, we both realized that everything had gone really quiet. There were no longer cars passing by. The cars up ahead stopped moving completely. But the main thing is that we no longer hear the sound of the music playing at the end of the street from a small cafe. But we did see someone on the other side of the road, and that we could hear. And it was completely freaking me out. It was screaming, and it sounded just like somebody was going mad. Everything felt so deeply unsettling to both of us that we commented on how quiet and how unnatural things felt. We reached the end of the block where the cafe was, and it was like being thrown into a wall of noise. Suddenly we could hear the cars, and they started moving past us loudly. Bikes started going by, ringing their bells. It was basically like all the city sounds came back in full force. It was incredibly jarring, and to go from such an unnatural, unsettling quiet to everything back to normal all of a sudden, it was hard to focus. We spoke about it and both experienced the exact same thing, and I also had an inexplicable feeling that we had walked into some different moment in time, but I was not sure why I felt that way. As we walked home, we both felt a bit unsettled, and again, we passed the same guys on the street, exactly the same, but this time they had messed up inhuman faces, and they gave off extremely aggressive vibes. So we had the same feeling that everything isn't right, but maybe it was because we were already in a state of mind, and it was a few days close to Halloween, after all. Maybe they were dressed up. We got home, and our son acted like we had been gone for ages. I checked my phone, and the grocery store walk would have taken roughly about 10 minutes, and it had taken over 30 minutes. I don't know what happened, but even a week later, I still feel shaken by it. I've actively avoided walking down that same block during the week, but it seems so small, but it totally freaked me out, and it just felt so wrong and sinister somehow. Has anybody else experienced something similar? Any theories? I can't get it out of my head. It's so weird that my partner and I experienced the same thing at the same time. What is your guys' thoughts on that? I personally, it's the moments that seem to freeze, or the sound that seems to freeze, that really seems to be the repetition. And we talked about this in last week's episode a little bit as well, but that feeling like everything went strange and quiet and things around you became distorted. And that is a reoccurring narrative, essentially, in every single one of these stories. So it's really hard to kind of dismiss them as imaginative. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know. Story number 5 is called I Think I Stepped into a Parallel Universe for a Moment. And it was posted 3 years ago by 17 Demon, and I'm going to spell this out because I don't want to be censored. Dicks. You could do the wording in your head. Anyway, this happened when I was about 18 or 19, but I remember it so vividly because of how jarring and confusing it was. I have been a few odd experiences with dreams, but nothing in the middle of the day like this. So when this happened, I was still living at home with my parents, and we lived in my childhood home. This was pretty much all I have ever known, and we moved there when I was 3 years old. I had a habit of going on daily walks in a nearby park, something I did nearly every single day since I was 14 or 15, up until I moved out. It was the summer, and it was around 1 or 2 p.m., and I went to leave the house on one of my walks. I slipped on my shoes, and I went out the door as usual, but when I stepped out of the house, I looked up, and my neighborhood felt completely wrong. It didn't look different. It looked exactly the same as it usually did. A small ravine next to our house, the tree in the front yard, the steep driveway, and our neighbor's house. All of it looked completely normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong and different with it all. It felt like reality was warped or something. I stood at the front porch for a minute or so trying to figure out what I felt so incredibly wrong about. And after a while, though, I figured I was just being silly, and I made my way down the driveway. When I was about halfway down, my neighbor, who was tending to his garden across the street, looked up towards me. He stared at me as if he had seen a ghost, and his face went completely pale. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Before I could even stare at him back in confusion, I was back inside my house at the front door, about to leave. I was completely shaken, and I had no idea why I had ended up back in my front door. I had no idea what I just experienced, and when I pulled the door open again, it felt completely normal this time. Nothing felt wrong anymore. It was jarringly normal. The only difference was when I opened the door again, my neighbor was not out front gardening. So I decided I might not go for a walk that day. Years later, I have no idea what I experienced, as it sounds so weird. The part that freaks me out the most is how wrong the neighborhood felt, despite looking exactly the same. So, between the weird teleportation back indoors and my neighbor acting like he was staring at a ghost, the feeling of wrongness is the thing that bothered me the most. I don't know how to explain it. I didn't feel unsafe. I didn't feel dread. It just felt like I was looking at a completely different version of my neighborhood. I don't think it's something I'll ever forget. I've never really told anybody about this, and I'm a pretty skeptical person, but I have no way to explain it. I loved this one. I thought this one was so creepy. I don't know about you guys, but I think if I ever had a moment where things kind of restarted, it would feel very Final Destination. I wouldn't leave my house that day. I would be like, okay, this is the sign that death is swimming for me, and I need to stay home today. So have you guys ever experienced that? literally being transported, feeling like you did something and then waking up or suddenly opening your eyes and you're back before you had done it. I don't know. And then the idea that his neighbor felt like he was a ghost. It makes you wonder if it's something that happened in the future. Maybe he was transported into the future where he was no longer alive. I don't know. Story number 6 is titled, They Were Not of This Era. And it was from username PageR1453. I don't really know what you would call this. A glitch, a time slip, or a weird coincidence. I'm really not sure. I'm from West Yorkshire, UK, and I'm a 27-year-old woman, but this happened in 2010, when I was just 15, and I remember it as if it was yesterday. So here is my story. Me, my mom, and my grandma, and a friend all went to a local coastal town for the day. We had been many times before, at least 3 or 4 times a year because we have family who live there. Ever since my mom was a child, we had always traveled the same route through the countryside, rather than the motorway, because we'd like to stop off on what we called the halfway house. And we grab a sandwich on the way and a drink on the way back. We'd always stop at the same places because it's part of the routine and what we have always done and enjoyed. On this particular day, everything was normal. We had driven to the coast, we stopped for a sandwich, and the sun was shining. It was a normal, lovely day. However, on the way back is when things got weird. We had set off mid to late afternoon because we had wanted to miss all the evening traffic and to make sure my friend got home at a decent time. The journey felt normal. We traveled the same roads as we had always had and was planning to stop off at the usual pub for a drink. Non-alcoholic, of course. In the space of about 5 to 10 minutes, we noticed that the weather had really changed. It had gone from being a glorious, warm, sunny day to being gray, overcast, and quite cold. We didn't think much of it at the time, and then my mom says, "Oh, I don't know where I am." Confused, we just said, "Well, you must have taken a wrong turn," but she had admitted that she had been on the same road for at least 8 miles, a road that we had traveled countless times. We wondered if the road had been altered since we'd last visited, because now none of us recognized the road or the surroundings. We looked for familiar landmarks that would hopefully guide us to the right direction, but there was nothing but fields for miles. We had begun to notice that the road we were on was quite quiet, and we seemed to be the only car driving on it. Nothing had passed us for what seemed like ages. Me and my friend began to get a little anxious because of how weird this felt, and we were worried that we were lost. My mom calmed us down and said not to worry, that the next village we drive through, we'll just pull over and we can set up the stat nav. Now, this is 2010. So the phones didn't really have maps or anything yet like they do today. About 10 minutes later, we saw a couple of houses in the distance. As we approached, we noticed that there were 2 semi-detached houses, a small farmhouse, a yard, and an old-fashioned level crossing for trains and a pub. My grandma suggested that we pull into the pub and my mom could set up her stat nav and we could have our halfway house drink while we were waiting. We entered the pub and it was empty except for an old man in a rocking chair in the front of a burning fire. He stopped rocking the chair abruptly when we walked in and stared at us like as if in shock. He was wearing brown work trousers with braces, black boots, and a cream shirt with a knitted vest, a flat cap, and he was smoking a pipe. It was as if we stepped right out of 2010 and into 1910. He didn't speak, he just stared at us, and we approached the bar, and the barmaid landlady was walking behind the bar and halted in her tracks as soon as she saw us. Again, in shock. We asked if the pub was open due to being so quiet, and she said, "Oh yes, it is. What can I get you?" So we all asked for soft drink, being underage at the time, and my mom was driving. The lady scrambled around to get us some drinks and then looked baffled when we tried to pay with a credit card. She used paper and a pencil to add up the cost of our drinks, so we paid with loose change to make it a little easier for her. To the right of us was a narrow staircase, and down ran a little girl who was about the age of 7 or 8, and she was wearing white tights, brown brog-like shoes, and a burgundy pinafore-style embroidered dress, with a hand-knit cardigan, and her hair was in ringlets. She gasped and also looked surprised when she saw us, looked between us and the lady behind the bar, presumably her mother. We thanked them and took our drinks outside to one of the wooden tables. The man in the rocking chair began to rock again and watched us closely and intensely as we walked out. We sat outside with hushed voices and spoke about how weird this whole situation was. We noticed how there isn't anyone else around. There's no other cars parked, there's no other people in the pub, and no people walking the streets near the houses either. The place almost seemed deserted and abnormally quiet, kind of like it was stuck in time. As we quickly finished the drinks, we got back into our cars as quickly as possible and left within a matter of minutes. We were back on the road, and we all recognized that the sun was shining once again. The whole thing was so bizarre and unbelievable that all we could talk about for the rest of our journey home. We were trying to understand the situation we had just experienced. The unrecognizable road, the old-timey clothing, the overall feeling that we were in a place that we weren't supposed to, and how the people reacted when they saw us, as if we were the aliens. So that's my story. The memory of all of it is so clear to this day. I'll never forget the expression on their faces, and we still talk about it. 12 years later, all of our memories are so clear. It's possible that it was the most strangest experience of our life. I feel like I wanted to share my story on here and to get others' opinion if anybody else had experienced anything similar. Thanks for reading. Well, what do you guys think? I think that they probably stepped into some kind of alternate universe or alternate dimension. It's so hard with these time slips because they're not necessarily going back in time like you would think from Outlander, where she steps back and she's living amongst the people and everything seems almost normal. Although I don't think there's anything normal about that, but where this, it's almost that feeling of being out of place, that you are stepping into a place that you shouldn't be. And the fact that they seemed like the ones that people were confused about makes it all the stranger. Our last story number 7, is called Weird Time Slip? And it's from username anon88872. Alright, this is super weird thing that happened to me and my friend the other day. I'm pretty sure it was a time slip, but I'm not exactly sure. So we were walking in Pittsburgh, a pretty big city, and we rounded the corner to walk by a place I had never seen before. It was a little strip of land between two industrial/city-looking vibes with a forest and a church. It was a strip of forest that offered a nice relief compared to the big city concrete. Anyway, we walked by this pretty church and saw a sign in the front of the church that said, "Celebrating our 80th anniversary." We thought nothing of it, but all of a sudden, we both agreed that the atmosphere felt off. A car drove past us, but it looked really old. Everything around us was so silent. The car didn't even make noise. Whatever we decided to do was turn back and start to leave the church. We walked to the staircase to leave, and a little valley the church was in, where the church was basically out of view. We started walking up the stairs and saw that the anniversary poster in the front of the church had changed, and we took a double take. The sign now said celebrating our 150th anniversary, and the atmosphere wasn't quiet or eerie anymore. My friend just said, "Did it just change 80 to 150? And we agreed that we had seen the same thing. We went back down the stairs to double check that we weren't seeing things incorrectly, and the sign still said 150. Still, not really sure what happened, but either way, it was pretty freaky." And then she did post an update. "I found the church. Okay, forest was a bit of an overstatement, but behind the church they didn't cut down the trees, and compared to the rest of the city, it did kind of look like a forest by memory. Also, I now have some more interesting facts. I looked up at the church, and it turns out it's 103 years old. I went back to the text I had sent of the incident, and it turns out I got my days wrong in my recollection, that I had seen it change from 50 to 90. So, still weird, but it was 103, not 150. Second, turns out the school right by it is trying to demolish the church, and I wonder if it's kind of a spirit or universe of the church crying for help. I know me changing the years makes me look super uncredible, but I just found the subreddit and I was remembering the incident a couple weeks back, and the church is called St. Ange Center, and I've attached a text from that day and I've linked the article about them tearing it down. So, even with the time change, even with the dates changed, that story still stands out as strange. It has so many of the same markers that we talked about in the previous episode. The silence, the almost seemingly, not that you're connected to the area, but you're almost kind of a mirage within this time slip. So you're not fully there, and that might be why we don't hear sounds or everything seems distorted or strange, is because we're not truly there. Not like a going back in time where you're truly back in that space. You're kind of just hovering between your time and that time, like a purgatory, I guess you could say. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. If you liked this episode, if you liked these stories, please let me know what you thought. Give me your feedback. Give me your opinions about the stories. If you've experienced something like this, please let me know. I always love hearing your creepy stories. And I think I might do another listener creepy story episode eventually, maybe in the spring. So if you have creepy stories, send them my way. You can reach us at letstalkspookypodcast@gmail.com, or you can check out our socials at Let's Talk Spooky Pod on TikTok and Let's Talk Spooky on Instagram. And again, if you have not hit that like or subscribe button, please do. It helps us grow. It helps you get alerts that we've posted new episodes, which we do every Thursday. And if I post a bonus episode, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, might do that, then you also get a notification for that as well. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will chat with you guys again next Thursday. Stay curious, stay spooky, and stay in your own time zone. This episode was written and produced by me, Shauna, and the team here at Let's Talk Spooky. All research and links can be found in the description box below. If you have a spooky story that you wish to share, or you just want to say hi, check us out on our socials at Let's Talk Spooky Pod on TikTok and Let's Talk Spooky on Instagram.